This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
Introducing Wondersuite from Bluehost.com. Website creation is hard, but now with Bluehost, you can answer a few simple questions about your business and get a unique WordPress website or store right away. From there, you can customize your design, colors, and content. And Bluehost automatically helps you get found in search engines like Google and Bing. From step-by-step guidance to suggested plugins, Bluehost makes WordPress wonderful for everyone. Go to bluehost.com/wondersuite.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
It's St. Patrick's Day and we are on St. Nick Street in Bristol drinking Guinness.
Guinness is really good, but it's hard to drink depending on where you are. So it's nicer in Ireland, so it's hard to find a good Guinness in Bristol. But this is actually a particularly good Guinness, and that's why I don't drink it all the time.
I had a friend who used to get a packet of crisps and dip his crisps in the head of the Guinness as a light dip.
There's definitely a Guinness hype at the moment. I think the introduction of Split Imagery and those games like that have definitely put it on a different platform, but it's always been there, you know. It's just more expensive now.
It might seem a bit odd for a brand that's over 200 years old and owned by a huge multinational drinks company, but Guinness is having a bit of a moment. Global drinks brand Diageo, who own Guinness, claim that for the first time, at least for a period of 2022, it overtook Carling to become the best-selling pint in all of Britain. There's also the sense that it's getting a bit cool, with even Kim Kardashian photographed with a pint of the black stuff celebrating St. Patrick's Day last year. Social media is supercharging the trend for a younger generation, with a cottage industry of ginfluencers across Instagram and TikTok proudly brandishing creamy domed black and white stouts and trading recommendations for where to find the holy grail of a perfect pint. Welcome to the Food Programme. I'm Jimi Famurewa, and in this episode I want to explore this phenomenon and also look at the drinks, stouts and porters behind it, whose origin can be traced back to 18th century London. First though, into the eye of the storm, a pub that opened just last year. So we are in the Devonshire pub right in the heart of London, kind of by Theatreland and Soho, and it is eerily quiet because it's normally frenziedly busy in here. Hundreds and hundreds of people ordering one drink, and that drink is pints of what has come to be known as the best pint of Guinness in London and in perhaps the country.
It's insane. We had a special guest in an hour set Sunday. He came in for his dinner and then he came down here and he played in here for an hour.
Wow, of course he did.
Unbelievable.
That's amazing.
It was quite extraordinary. We haven't quite got over it. Wow. I'm Oisin Rogers. I run the Devonshire pub at Piccadilly, and I think you've come to see me because we sell a few pints of Guinness here.
The question of how many are you willing to say? Because you ran out of Guinness after a first couple of days.
It's slightly embarrassing that it happened because, you know, we estimated how much we would need for 10 days, and we had that in the cellar, which was about 50 tubs of Guinness, and we actually went through it in 4 days.
So let's zoom out a little bit. That is a real surefire sign that something unprecedented is going on, right? You've worked in pubs for a long time. How do you explain what's going on at the moment with stouts generally and with Guinness in particular?
Well, it's a pretty ubiquitous and unique drink, but what I think about Guinness is that people like to talk about it more than any other beer, and that's why we're here. But but obviously I see it all day long, and I see people buying their pints, and then they look at their pints, and then they move it around, and they check how sticky the head is against the glass, and they check the consistency, and then they taste it, and then they talk about splitting the G, and then they talk to their friends, and then they go on the internet, and then the internet's full of photographs, and everybody's saying, well, mine's better than yours, or yours is better than mine. And really, it's brilliant for pubs, because what we want in pubs is for people to have a chat and meet each other and have a conversation. And it's a very social type of conversation, because in fact it's quite bland and banal.
Yeah. Let's hone in on that perfect pint aspect of it, the sort of this holy grail that has been built up on vlogs. What is the key to what you're doing here and what people are coming back for?
We did spend a couple of months making sure that we had the very best possible installation for the product, so that the product comes out absolutely perfectly, exactly as it would in Dublin. And that seems to have worked for us. And in fact, we designed that installation before we designed the bar or the pub. So actually, the pub's kind of designed around the Guinness. Now I reckon in London pubs the chance of getting a really good pint is about 90%. But to get it above the 90%, there's a lot of extra little trickery that we do. From the mixed gas, to the pressure of the gas, to the temperature of the cellar, to the temperature of the barrel itself, to the width of the lines, to the temperature of the cooling system, to the width of the pipe at the line, to the size of the nozzle, and of course there's all the cleanliness, there's the glassware, and there's quite a lot of other little bits and pieces, and each one on its own seems insignificant, but as you put it all together, you get this marginal gain across it, where you get this consistency, and people appreciate it.
Even though it's the morning, we had to try a pint.
We always pour this way. We allow the beer to fall into the glass this way, and you can see and hear it. It's coming out under really high pressure, and that is creating this incredible mass of nitrogen bubbles, which takes ages to settle. And the longer it takes, in my opinion, the better the head. And it'll take about a minute and a half for that to settle up really nicely, and then what we're going to do then is we're going to float that head to the top so it sits proud of the glass, so you get the dome in the middle.
So this is part of the two-part justification, isn't it? If you did that all the way to the top, what would happen?
Well, if you look at it now, it's where it's settling at the moment. That's how it would have settled at the top, which means that the meniscus is negative, so you'd have a dip in the middle rather than a dome. Also, it changes the characteristic of how the head sticks to your mouth, your lips, the inside of the glass. So it's a textural thing rather than a taste thing. But it's all part of the experience of drinking it. Anyway, Jimmy, cheers.
Cheers. Wow. Okay. This is very good. You have one sip and you just want another, and that is spectacularly creamy and soft.
It's not it's the opposite to offensive, isn't it? It doesn't tingle your taste buds. There's something about that, I think, in the way that it is, that it's almost bland, and it's a beautiful bland.
I said to myself that I wasn't actually going to have a drink this morning, but what are you going to do?
Cheers.
Cheers. So Guinness is a stout, but we've also been mentioning porters. To understand why, we need to look at the history of these drinks. And it's a history that starts not in Ireland, but in London.
I'm Laura Hadland, and I'm a beer writer. So I spend a lot of time researching the history of beer and thinking about how that kind of reflects on contemporary society.
Amazing. So let's start with stouts and porters. When and where are the first dark beers of that category brewed, and who's drinking them?
So we're talking about kind of 1800s London is where this story starts. We've got some big breweries. Beer has been the staple drink of English society for quite a few centuries by that point. And increasingly, the government's deciding to tax brewers. And so they start to develop this new recipe, bringing a beer that is made with the cheapest wood-dried malt that they can find, and lowering the ABV. And because of this wood-dried malt, you're getting this kind of slightly smoky taste to it and a slightly darker colour. When it was stored in wooden casks, This actually added to the flavour over that kind of long maturation time. It would have great texture and people really liked it. And we see that lots of the London porters are drinking it. Those who worked loading and unloading the vessels along the river. Some porters who were carrying messages, parcels, letters, runners essentially all around London.
This isn't an after work kicking back. They're drinking it to almost fuel their work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so because it was so popular with this specific kind of category of workers in London, it became known as porter.
That quintessential London side of the story might surprise some people that have come to really associate stouts in particular with Irish drinking culture. When do they enter the story of stouts and porters?
It's pretty much as it starts to take off in London. It's not a long time until we see Guinness enter the frame. So 1759, Arthur Guinness famously takes out his 9,000-year lease of St James's Gate in Dublin to start his second brewery, but a bigger project. And it's recorded that he went to visit London in 1776. And so he picked up the recipe and took it back to Dublin with him, and then gave it his own little tweak and actually called it Guinness.
What would you say are the key differences between the stout, the Irish dry stout that we know, and porter in this kind of broader category?
So we've got kind of a rolling history here. So we start off with the porter, and then over time the brewers decide that they're going to make a stronger version, a strong porter or a stout porter. And over time that gets contracted, and then it starts to go off in all kinds of different directions.
Would you say that it's a perception and a branding and a marketing thing to some degree then? You know, one person's stout versus one person's porter.
Yeah, I mean, the lines get really blurred, but I think for me, a modern porter is going to have kind of slightly more hoppy influence. So you're more likely to get sort of more sweetness, whereas a stout is going to be more led by those sort of roasty, toasty, sort of coffee, chocolate, all of those sorts of notes.
Right, forgive a little bit of beer nerdery here, but a huge innovation that Guinness made to drinking dark beer is the nitro pour. Before its invention, porter or stout was served in quite a fiddly way, as BBC Northern Ireland reporter Larry McCoubry poetically explains in a 1973 news report.
See, it's drawn from two barrels. A high one first, to give it a bit of life. A good glassful of gushing good cheer that settles slowly towards the bottom of the glass into a thick, contented cream. It takes several minutes for that cream to substantiate towards the bottom of the glass, when it's ready for the muscle and the sinew, the real body of the drink itself, and that comes from the other barrel of flat.
Although there might be something romantic about this two-barrel pour, it wasn't a particularly consistent way to serve in pubs. In the 1950s, a mathematician who worked for Guinness, called Michael Ash, realised that adding nitrogen into the gas mix in a keg created a creamy head with tight bubbles, and the nitro serve was born.
They make a big deal of the cascade, the way the bubbles ebb and flow when it's poured, and the long settler time to create that perfect head. Don't even get me started on the two-part pour. There's all this mythology and ceremony behind it, but all of these technologies are very carefully guarded. And we're seeing, lots more people now using nitrogen in their beers, but they're all having to figure out how to do it for themselves, because Guinness don't provide a how-to manual on how to add nitrogen to your dispense,
Guinness is undeniably the big beast in the stout and porter market, but there have been attempts to make inroads by both macro and micro brewers. Recently, craft beer giants Brewdog have been marketing aggressively, with one promotion even offering free pints of their Blackheart Nitro Stout to any drinkers who brought old Guinness glasses into their pubs. Another big dark beer story has been in the success of brewers Anspach and Hobday, who are a small-scale David to the Goliath of Guinness, with their critically acclaimed Nitro Porter, London Black.
I'm Jack Hobday, co-founder of Anspach and Hobday. We're a brewery based in Croydon.
And I'm Paul Anspach of Anspach and Hobday, the other co-founder. So this is the main brewery. This is where all of the beer gets made. We currently are brewing London Black. So what you can probably hear is the early stages of the mash. So yeah, everything that we make comes out of here. As we stand at the moment, between 60 and 70% of that is actually London Black.
Amazing. You mentioned London Black there. Can you explain a little bit about what a nitro porter actually is?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start with, the actual the beer itself is porter, which it's the original beer of London. So it's a dark beer. It's sort of medium strength, lots of like roasty coffee and chocolate flavours.
So where does the nitrogen part come into it? Is it more challenging to make a nitro beer?
There are challenges in the brewery, and then there are challenges in the sort of hospitality setting. Because nitrogen really doesn't want to dissolve into beer, it can be quite hard to get it into the beer in the first place. You obviously need some slightly more expensive, friendly equipment to then be able to understand what the mix of gases are in the beer, because you've now got two gases which are obviously interacting. The other side is then when you go into sell it into a pub, you need to have a separate gas setup because it has to be dispensed on a nitrogen mix. Trying to get this beer into people's pubs if they've not been set up for it in the first place is a challenge, and it's something that we made sure we were able to answer. So we will do a lot of work for pubs in getting them set up correctly.
So we're pouring out halves of London Black. I think it's probably a fairly craft thing to do a half of a beer, but we obviously do pints as well.
So here we go. Cheers. It does feel like something different. There's a hint of a Guinness or a sort of widely available nitro stout, but it's got the body and richness and complexity that I would associate more with a bottle poured porter or something that hasn't necessarily got the creaminess. There is this kind of David and Goliath battle. London Black has done so well and is found so many fans. Do you feel like there is a willingness to accept alternatives and kind of broaden it out a bit?
I think really it's not about trying to beat Guinness in any sort of sense, because I think it's important that we recognise it's a really good beer. So you don't need to win on that level, but there's something maybe odd that in a city that was once the brewing capital of the world, the most drunk stout is actually an import from Ireland. That's based on a recipe that probably originally started in London. It doesn't quite tie up to the sort of provenance. You wouldn't go to Italy and expect a wine to be not Italian on the menu. So I think it's not really about beating Guinness and seeing ourselves as against them, but more just rightfully promoting where we are from, London, and what our beer can do, and focusing on quality and the passion of what we're doing. I think the beer will win out by itself.
A big part of this new interest in stouts and porters has been built online, and one man has been identified as having had a particular effect on fueling the frenzy. It's all right, I think we want to order, if that's possible.
Yes, what would you like?
I think, can we have 2 pints of Guinness, please?
Guinness?
Yeah.
So my name is Ian Ryan. I'm a Guinness fella on the internet. That's pretty much the only way I can describe it.
I do think that you're, underselling your impact and what your two accounts, Shit London Guinness and Beautiful Pints, have both accomplished and have been really at the forefront of. How would you describe Shit London Guinness and how did it start?
So I moved to London 6 years ago, and honestly I wasn't even that much of a Guinness drinker when I first moved over. Once I started drinking Guinness, I started noticing that the pints of Guinness in London weren't amazing. I'd say any random pub you walk into that doesn't have a reputation for Guinness, you're kind of playing with fire.
It's almost like an aggregator. It's like a community thing where you were the sort of anonymous face for people to kind of name and shame in some ways. Quite a lot of people have sort of marked you out and name dropped you as somebody that is quite key to this incredible growth in popularity that nitro stouts in general and Guinness in particular have enjoyed in the last couple of years. Do you feel like you've been quite influential?
Yes, I think so. I'm not quick to be like, I have saved Guinness. But like, I think, you know, and I do get it from bartenders a lot. I guess what it boils down to is just that pubs are more conscious about the quality of their Guinness. And also, you know, it's grown in popularity so much over the last few years that they're kind of forced to as well. And what the page does is just kind of keeps them, you know, keeps it in the back of their mind, you know, when they're hooking up the next keg, like, are we ready to serve a good pint of Guinness?
And you are, a lot of the time, mentioning people's businesses. Has that led to any sort of trouble or issues, or has there been any controversy around that?
Honestly, no. Like, most of the reactions are people kind of lean into it a bit, or else they ignore it. And you know, and if it's, I've done it where a pub gets posted on London and Guinness. They message me and they say, look, it's all sorted now, and I come in and I post a picture of them on beautiful pints next week, you know, and you can turn it around.
It's like you're that. This agent going around and ratifying the kind of pint quality. How that must be a strange thing to suddenly have fallen into that isn't even your day job.
Like, Guinness monitor the account as well. You know, if I walked down the road and I tagged the pub, in theory Guinness would come, but it's not like Guinness coming in like kicking down the door and being like, give us your kegs. It's like they kind of help them a bit, you know, if they were struggling with the Guinness, and then I think they give them like a sign and it's like, you know, Guinness quality approved kind of thing. So,
right. And it does feel like this is a movement at the moment that, interestingly, is really driven by young people. Do you have any sort of theories about why Guinness has been embraced so wholeheartedly by a new generation?
Yeah, it's funny because I've watched it over the last few years happen. I do have a couple of theories. Like, I guess one of them, like during lockdown, you know, that's when my accounts really like got big, and it's simply because Guinness is the only pint that looks nice in a photo. You know, it's like, even if you like don't drink it, you kind of go, yeah, it looks nice.
You know, it's almost like an emoji, isn't it?
It is, exactly. And you know, there's so much people posting about, oh, I miss going to the pub, and with that, then you got all these pictures of beautiful pints of Guinness kind of blowing up over lockdown, and it's probably something that goes into the back of someone's mind. You know, from there, I guess then you have, like, I don't do this now, and I would never endorse anyone to do this, but see, I split the G.
Well, I was going to ask you about this. What on earth is going on? Can you explain splitting the G to the uninitiated?
Honestly, I don't do it. Like, it's not my thing. But what it is like, you get a pint of Guinness and you drink, and you're trying to get it like in between the G on the Guinness.
Right, the first sip, you try to land it.
Yeah.
Exactly on a point in the glass. As a kind of game, almost gamifying drinking, and this very traditional drink that has its roots in porters in London in the 1700s, and has been embraced and kind of reinvented by like a new generation.
And I think what a lot of it actually falls back to as well is like, you know, a love for pubs. As Guinness is getting more popular, there's more of a kind of appreciation for pubs in general. I think, you know, they struggled for so long in, you know, various lockdowns and all that, and if more and more people are going to all these great pubs to drink Guinness, great.
Time for another dark beer made by a London brewery. This time, it's a smoked porter called Echo Black. One of the things that helped solidify Guinness's success was spreading the brand all across the world. Other than Ireland and the UK, the country that consistently drinks the most Guinness is Nigeria, where the foreign extra stout version is brewed. This is sold in bottles without nitrogen and has a significantly higher alcohol content of 7.5%. Echo Black isn't quite as strong as that, but at 5% ABV, it's a bit sturdier than the other stouts and porters we've been talking about. It's really good. It's got like a really forthright bitterness, but then there's a mellow sweetness that comes afterwards.
Exactly.
It really does bring to mind the African or Caribbean style export stout that feels like it's about bitterness, and it's a grown-up drink. I associate this with what grown-ups would have, and I would find disgusting at a certain age. But
okay, I'm Anthony Adedikpe from Echo Brewery.
And I'm Helena Adedikpe from Echo Brewery.
And we're currently sat in our tap room in Peckham, which we opened a few months ago.
Tell us a little bit initially about Echo Brewery and what sets it apart?
I think for us it was probably about blending our cultures. So Anthony's Nigerian, which is where the name Echo comes from, you know, the old name for Lagos. And I'm Congolese. So when we were looking at starting this, you know, we thought it would be really interesting if we could add that part of ourselves to our business. No one else was doing that, especially in the UK.
Talk to me about Echo Black. Am I right in thinking that was the first beer you produced?
Unlike many breweries who, I guess, go down the IPA route, we brewed the Echo Black first. We brewed a smoked porter. And we spoke to loads of brewers and they'd tell us that you guys are crazy, why did you do that? And in honesty, it was what we liked.
Do you think that is a cultural thing as well? Obviously, stout and porters have like a real particular hold within African cultures, Caribbean cultures. Was it that cultural lineage that prompted you to go with that first?
One thing is worth mentioning is growing up, I would always see my great-gran. She would have a bottle of porter nearly every night before bed. So she'd get through her chores and do whatever she wanted to do for the day. And then at the end of the evening, nearly every night, she would have a bottle of Guinness. So it was always around. So Guinness, stouts, they were always around growing up. And you'd go to traditional African parties and like birthdays, weddings, any event that was marking an occasion, and there would always be bottles of stout around. I'm not sure about on your side, Helen. I guess it's the same.
I mean, the beer element, definitely. A lot of the women in my family drank a lot of beer. I think they often I think especially in West African countries, obviously Congo is central, but a lot of malt drinks as well, or like, you know, anything with that kind of taste of like cola nut or like malted drinks. Africans love that, love it with food.
Have you found that there is perhaps in certain communities, in Caribbean and African communities, is there always the readiness to go for the craft option, or is there that loyalty to the known brands, the Guinnesses, the Dragon Stouts?
110%. I think.
You could probably guess that was coming.
Yeah. I mean, that was an amazing question, and I think. Yeah, definitely. I think we knew this anyways. We know our people, right? We know that they are loyal to what they know.
There's an irony to the fact that this thing that a lot of people are seeing as quintessentially African is Irish-made, Irish-brewed drink with origins in London and England. Is that something that you've encountered as well?
A lot of people do sort of conflate it being brewed in Nigeria and it being Nigerian.
Right, that's interesting.
Right, it's something that not a lot of people realise that they are separate things. We definitely see that, and people still are very loyal because it's a Nigerian drink.
So, will this thirst for stouts and porters continue? Or will it be more of a passing fad like Alco-Pops and ice cider? Who better to ask than Ian Ryan, a man at the centre of this current shift in drinking habits? It does feel like a particular mania at the moment. Do you see it lasting? You've been involved in social media trends before. You've probably seen them ebb and flow. Do you see this one as different?
It's odd because it didn't, it's not something that happened overnight. It's not like fidget spinners or whatever. Kind of find your drink at a certain point and you go, I like this, and you go, as can tend to happen, and it definitely happened to me, becomes sort of a personality trait because you're so into it, and I think a lot of those people aren't going to just stop drinking Guinness. I think 20, 30 years from now, I don't see why they would be like, throw it away. So I don't think, things will come and go, but I think it'll probably keep going.